Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Well, as you may know, Canada is in the 60th place in the world in terms of delivering the vaccine. Now, there are plenty of reasons to be skeptical about a vaccine rushed to market, a vaccine that interacts with your own body's RNA, a vaccine for a disease that has a 99.9% recovery rate for the general population. But for those who want it, let them have it. Alas, they can't get it in Canada because Justin Trudeau has bungled pretty much his one job. And it's something the media party actually cares about because they believe with perfect faith in these vaccines. And like I say, if you want it, feel free to have it. But Trudeau screwed it up. I think it's so bad that he's possibly delaying what's so obviously his plan for a spring election. So what do you do when you're in 60th place in the world for vaccine delivery, which has become the ultimate test of how progressive you are? Well, you switch the subject. You start calling people your enemies, Nazis. You call the Proud Boys a terrorist group, and you go for that old standby. You ban firearms again. And joining us now via Skype from True North Wire is our friend Andrew Lawton, our friend and reporter over there, host of the Andrew Lawton Show, and a firearms expert. I'm not going to say an expert, but certainly an aficionado who knows the rules. Am I right?
Well, absolutely. And you have to if you're a gun owner in Canada, Ezra, because the risk if you run afoul of those rules can be imprisonment.
So maybe you are an expert. It's certainly, I think everyone who has a firearm has to become an expert because the rules change and they're so weird. I've got a great story by True North in front of me here. The headline is, Liberal gun bill bans toy guns that look like real firearms. Is that true? So do we all have to be gun law experts, even those of us who don't have firearms but have like toys around the house? Do we have to become an expert too?
Well, you may. In fact, this is an interesting story because a couple of years ago, I think Apple was the first one to do it. They changed the gun emoji to look less like a real firearm, and they changed it to one that was this like bright neon green squirt gun looking thing with an orange tip on it. And it was so absurd because they were trying to avoid having, I guess, some sort of violent imagery, even though there are other things in emojis that you'd think would be more problematic. But that's actually what's happening with real guns now. When I was a kid, if you got a gun, you wanted it to look really cool and really like a real gun. Whereas now the only ones you're going to be allowed to have are the bright green neon Nerf gun or squirt gun type things. Because one of the aspects of this, and again, it's a long bill, and this was just one paragraph, but it jumped out to me in the bill. Update the criminal code to ensure that any device, including an unregulated air gun that looks like a conventional regulated firearm, is prohibited for the purposes of import, export, sale, and transfer. So if little Timmy has a realistic looking airsoft gun, he can keep it. But if he wants to give it to a friend, if he wants to buy a new one, that's going to be illegal once this law is passed.
Now, airsoft, I'm not an expert in it, but I heard Sheila Gun Reed say that's the gun that fires soft things that actually don't hurt when you get hit. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a pellet gun, but not even with a BB. They're meant to shoot each other like paintballs, except they don't cover you in paint. They just hit you and maybe they sting a little bit, but they are by definition toy guns. Mm-hmm. But this, just to be clear, goes beyond that. This says any device. I mean, theoretically, if you had just a paperweight that looked like a gun, even if it didn't shoot anything out of it, that would be illegal under this.
That's crazy. I don't think we have a problem in Canada with airsoft guns. I live in Toronto, Canada's most crime-ridden city, not proportionally, but I mean, it's such a big city, there's so much crime here. There's a very interesting website that is published by the Toronto Police Service, and they every day update their shootings in the city so far this year page. It's quite a detailed page, and it compares it with past years, and a quick inspection of it shows that gun crime in Toronto under Mayor John Tory has tripled. So I think there is a shooting problem in Toronto. The stats sure say so. But it's not the farmers and duck hunters that are being targeted by this law, is it?
No, and just to put that into perspective, we know that most gun owners tend to be in rural areas or smaller communities around the country, Alberta, Saskatchewan. If legal gun ownership were correlated to gun crime, we would see gun crime in rural Alberta, in rural Saskatchewan, in southwestern Ontario, in eastern Ontario. That's not where we're seeing it. Where we see gun crime is in the cities, as in Toronto, as one notable example, also Montreal to some extent, places that by any measure are very low in terms of lawful ownership of restricted guns like handguns. So you're very right to point that out. The problem is not the law-abiding gun ownership. And one as well point that is missing here from the discourse tends to be that we do not even have any national tracking of where the guns used in crimes are. Every now and then, an individual police force that recovers one will try to track where it came from. Certainly, this happened with the Nova Scotia shooting, and they found out that not one of them was legally owned or legally purchased. But the thing is, we do not, as a rule, track this. So when we are talking about guns being on the street, the government is deliberately ignoring that most of these are imported illegally from overseas, mainly from the United States, with whom we share an unprotected border. But the reason they're not tracking it is because that they know it will deflate the myth that guns purchased by people like me are somehow meandering their way through the system to end up in the hand of a gangster, when that just isn't happening.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.